What is going on, guys? Pat in the shop, and tonight we're going to talk about a 400 horsepower Vortec headed small block combo, the cheapest motor I've ever built that makes great power. And this is a proven combo that I'm going to talk to you about. I know it makes 400 horsepower, you know, obviously give or take depending on a few factors, but I'm going to give you a head, cam, combination, bottom end, every information that I can give you, all the information I should give you, I should say, that's going to get you around 400 horsepower. I keep getting emails from guys about what cam to pick and this and that. So I thought, you know what? I know this combination makes 400 horsepower, so I am going to just give you the information, and then you can, you know, maybe go with that exact combination or kind of adapt it a little bit to what you're building, and so you can kind of have an idea of how it's all going to work together. So to give you a little history on this motor combination, I built it originally probably a couple years back now, and it was just some spare parts I had left over. I had an old school flat tappet block that I got in trade in when I built another motor. I had like most of the heads and the rockers and everything. I had all that stuff, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna put a real budget friendly motor together for someone. I went flat tappet cam. I picked a cam that you know, was fairly cheap and stuff, and just built a good cheap motor for someone that would put in a cruiser. And I ended up selling it to a guy, really good guy. Dealt with him a bunch of times ever since I've sold him the motor, but he put this combination, and he told me, oh, he's just going to use it for a cruiser, because I put a cam in there. It was kind of lumpy and stuff, but he ends up taking this thing to the drag strip every weekend all summer, after I sold it to him, revving it to 6 grand. He was so happy with it. He said the power is way out, you know, more than he ever expected. And then he ended up taking it to the dyno and putting down some really good numbers with it, and he was just so happy with it. So it's a combination that I kind of put in my back pocket, and I've used again for guys that want a budget build. So we're going to start off with the bottom end, and we're going to talk about what's that. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of everything, but I'm going to give you kind of a general summarization of what I used, and then you can kind of you know, pick and choose from there. So this motor I built was actually a 355. So what that is a 350 stock stroke of 3.48, or some guys say 3.5, and bore size of 4.030, so 30 over a stock 350 bore. And what I use for that combination is Summit Pistons. These are a really sweet deal. Use the Summit Pistons, and I did reconditioned rods. So the stock rods are okay in this power level, ARP rod bolts, and then all resized. But I went with a stock piston, and it actually ended up being very similar to the weight of the piston I took out. So the combination, it's always a good idea to have everything balanced. But if you're on a tight budget and you get a piston that's within a few grams, a lot of guys don't. But I always recommend balancing. But I'm just saying, if you're on a tight budget, you can do a piston swap as long as you get something relatively close in weight. So I went with a flat top piston. A lot of the stock Chevy 350 pistons are dished, so I went with stock compression height Summit piston, 30 over, like I said, flat top, because this combination you want about 9.5 to 10 to 1 compression, and that's what I typically build with this cam and with those heads. Any more than that, you might run into detonation problems. Any less than that, you're not going to get the power goals that you want. So 9.5 to 1 to 10 to 1 compression, somewhere in that range. And typically with a 350, a flat top piston, this is I think a 7cc 5 or 7cc valve relief piston, will get you in that range with a Vortec head. Used a Melling high volume pump, which I use on all. I used a 3/4 inch pickup. It was a 4-bolt main block. So all that stuff, you know, you can decide. You could probably, you know, if you have a 2-bolt main block, you'll probably be fine too. But you're gonna need to swap out pistons just to get that compression ratio up, and probably bore it out to freshen it up. Here's a good timing set if you're on a budget. This is just the Cloy's heavy duty C-3023 XSP double roller timing set. It's a good price for any flat tappet cam. So that's basically the stuff I used, and like I said, all the little detail stuff you can get into. I used a stock style oil pan, nothing fancy, no windage tray. Like I said, it was just a really basic rebuild kind of performance, but this combination ended up being great. So there's your bottom end. Let's move on to the heads next. Used a Vortec head. A lot of people seem to hate on these heads, but there's no doubt that these Vortec heads are great. And if you've seen my other videos, you know I'm a big fan of the Vortec heads. They do have their issues. They do crack sometimes, you know, more than I'd like to see on the deck surface, because the decks are thin. But if you can find a good set, and I find typically if they're an older set that hasn't cracked yet, usually they're not going to crack. So and don't hold me to that, they still can crack if you overheat them and stuff, but usually if you find a good old set and have them, you know, cleaned up and resurfaced, you usually be fine. But make sure you take off a minimal amount off those decks if you're getting them resurfaced. So I took a set of Vortec heads on that build. I did my beehive spring kit. So I sell a beehive spring kit. If you have, if you're interested in that, send me an email. There's an email address down below. I sell a beehive spring kit that can go on here to accommodate up to 580 lift. But on this particular combination, I did my standard lift kit, which is good up to 530. I did a mild pocket port job on that one, where basically you just go in and clean up the little bit of ridge around the valve to help with a little bit of the valve shrouding, you know, inside from the transition from the runner to the valve. So I just went in and cleaned it up. Honestly, nothing crazy, didn't do a crazy port job on it. Just basically cleaning up that lip. And if you feel it on your Vortec heads, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And it does make a little bit of a difference. But you don't have to go to town and port the crap out of them. You can do a little bit of cleanup in here, but don't reshape the whole. If you don't know what you're doing with porting, especially with Vortec heads, you don't want to reshape anything drastically, because you can affect the actual performance of the head. So basically that's it. I took a Vortec head, put my beehive springs on it, I did screw-in studs. And if you want to know how to do screw-in studs easily at home, I do have another video, so check that out. As you can see, actually, this is the head I used in the video, and I've done these 4 studs are screw-in, and these 4 studs are not. You can see they're the incognito screw-in studs. They actually look like stock studs, but they're actually screw-in, so you don't have to worry about pulling them out. So I did that. I used just a comp cans roller tip rocker arm, 1.5 ratio, and that was it for the heads. That's all you need to do on this combination. Next up, let's look at the camshaft. This is for demonstrating purposes, but this is, I just want to show you an example of a flat tappet cam, because that's what I used in this combination to save some money. Typically I like roller cams. You've probably heard me talk about that if you've watched my other videos. I normally like roller cams, but this was an older block with no provision for roller cam, and I didn't want to go retrofit cam just because, again, I was trying to keep the price down. We're trying to make cheap horsepower here, and typically a flat tappet cam, you're about a quarter of the price of a roller cam, maybe less by the time you factor in the lifters. So for this particular combination, I went with a Melling cam. And the Melling cam I went with was a Melling 22301. That cam has 480 lift intake and exhaust with the 1.5 rocker arms. It's got 288 duration at 232.32 intake and exhaust at 50 thou. So it's a really basic, simple cam. It's a 109, I believe. Yeah, 109 lobe separation angle. So it gives you that nice kind of choppy hot rod sound. It's got a decent amount of duration, and it seems to really combo well with the Vortec heads, especially after a little bit of work done to them. So it's like I said, flat tappet is cheap. The cam itself, you can get the cam for under $100, and then always match it up with a good set of lifters. I just used a set of Melling lifters with it to match the cam. Just make sure, obviously, with flat tappet cams, you do the proper break-in procedure and use the proper oil. or you're gonna have a little bit of headache when it comes to flat topic cams and wiping those lobes out. So to top that combination off, so now we got the bottom end together, we got the heads on. The intake manifold I went with was an RPC aluminum dual plane intake, not an air gap or anything fancy. It was just a cheaper intake, similar to like Edelbrock copy, so Jags mix, some like that. It's good up to I think 5,500 RPM they claim. It's just a basic aluminum intake, dual plane aluminum intake. I did a little bit of casting cleanup in the ports to kind of port match to the gaskets and the heads, the Vortec heads. Basically that's it. It was just ready to drop on. We ended up topping that off. He put a 600 CFM carb on that one I originally did, but anything from a 650 or 600 to probably a 670 carb would work good on this combination. If you want to go a little bit bigger and jet down, that's fine too. But this combination gives you a really nice classic hot rod sound. It's got that nice lumpy idle. It's very drivable though. He runs it, it's like a hot rod he drives quite often, in the Chevelle in particular, and everyone else I've used this cam on, it seems to be really happy with, as far as just getting that hot rod sound and the power. So there you go guys, hopefully that answers the guys who've been asking me about how to make 400 horsepower with a small block Chevy. It seems like a lot of guys want to get right around that 400 horsepower mark that are on a budget, and you know what, if you're using a Vortec head, that's not that hard to do with just a 355 or a 357, and maybe even a 350 shouldn't be an issue either. But typically you got to change out pistons to get that compression ratio up, and you're probably gonna need to get it bored anyway, so most of the time you end up with a 355. So you know, 400 horsepower is fairly achievable for fairly cheap. Your biggest cost is probably going to be getting the machine work done. Hopefully, you know, you could buy a whole rotating assembly, or like I said, just change pistons if you can find a good set of Vortec heads. But there's other options out there. Like I said, here we have a set of the Engine Quest, and here we have a set of the Iron Eagles. So I'm still working on doing a comparison test between all these and getting them on the flow bench, and you know, doing maybe a little bit of porting and seeing what we can get them up to comparable wise, and then you guys can decide which way you want to go with them. You know, we gotta stop hating on the Vortecs. I know they crack, but they really do work well. They really do for a stock head of you know, the old school small block. We can't compare them to the LS stuff. We're just not there. But as far as a stock small block head for cheap, I've been seeing a lot of comments and emails from guys where they're getting sets for $100 and they're not cracked. So you can get a set for $100 that aren't cracked. You're laughing, because you got a heck of a head with 400 horsepower plus capability for $100. So that's a win in my books. Not everyone makes 1,000 horsepower. So please like and subscribe. I'm putting out videos all the time. Comment below if you have any questions, or send me an email. Send me an email if you're interested in the Vortex spring kits I got available. They've been selling quite a bit lately with the videos I've been putting out, and guys seem to be really interested in the Vortex heads just like me. So anyways, thanks guys.